I have to admit, I got some things wrong in my previous video about the Yubikey, because it's actually worse than I initially thought. One of the problems I have with the Yubikey is the limited feature set, which doesn't entirely align with their marketing. I looked into adding Yubikey support to my own software. But it turns out you need to register your key to get an API key on Yubikey's website.
And you have to agree with terms of service you can't read.
And for the authentication to work, the authentication needs to go through Yubikey's server for every single authentication. But Yubikey, or Yubico, is a Swedish-American company. But that American in Swedish-American is kind of a security risk in and of itself. They can pull the plug at any time, or threaten to pull it, or make you do whatever they want. And it's not that they have never done that. There is precedent for that. But a completely different scenario. What if Yubico goes bankrupt? What if parts of the internet go down? Or what if they decide to charge you $100,000 a month beginning next month? And something that I realized after making my previous video, when you have multiple keys, you need to create an entry for every key on every single website. So I don't know how many logins you have, but let's say you have 75 logins. I think that's a pretty reasonable number. And you have 3 keys. Then you need to register a total of 70 times 3, 225 keys. And what if you decide to get an extra key? Then you need to register this key again for 75 logins. How do you keep track of that? It's really easy to miss a website or an application. I don't see that as frictionless like they advertise on the website. It would be useful if there was software to synchronize the keys somehow, for example, because that would reduce the friction that they talk about in the marketing material. And in extension of synchronization, encryption algorithms are improved all the time. 15 years ago we thought that MD5 hashing of passwords was secure. I talked about rainbow tables in my last video, but now we know better. But what if we find out that the current encryption algorithms have a problem? Or vulnerabilities? Or there is a vulnerability found in one of the keys? How do we update the Yubikey? And I get the security risks of that, because on the one hand you don't want malicious actors to overwrite the Yubikey, but on the other hand, yeah, not updating the key can be a potential risk as well. In my last video I criticized the usefulness of the key, and I still stand by that. I tried to register my Yubikey, for example, on 46 websites. From the 46 websites, literally none of them supported the Yubikey. 6 of them supported passkeys, like Google, and passkeys, while they work very clunky, it does work with the Yubikey. And 8 of the websites that I used supported 2FA. And sure, that is not necessarily Yubikey's fault, but the fault of websites. But that means that you can't go passwordless like they claim on the website. And it's certainly not frictionless like the website claims. There's one thing, however, I have to correct. I said that there was no documentation. That's not true. There is actually a lot of documentation. But the documentation is either too little for the beginner side, which is the thing that I criticized, or too extensive for technical people. There is somehow no middle road. My point was, it's not the information that you need. I should have communicated that better. My point still stands, because Tom, Dick and Harry, when they want to know something, they still have to Google and find the answer on Reddit, not on Yubico's website. I saw a lot of comments talking about user error. I'm an idiot. And yeah, that might be true, but commenters inadvertently proved my point actually about the documentation. Why am I able to set up things wrong? I mean, as a software engineer, I spent weeks and months on end to make sure that users can't set up my software the wrong way that borks up the security. Yubico cheaped out on the manual, because there is no manual with the product. The only thing that it says here on the packaging is get started, yubico.com/start. And then when I go to the website, I get that video that says you need to put in your YubiKey in the computer. No shit. So the documentation lacks and I'm able to set up the product wrong. Let's say that I'm not the only one that is to blame here. And I noticed that some people think that you can't bypass a key on Google. Well, let me show you my amazing hacking skills. Sure, that is a Google thing, but you can't claim that it is more secure because you literally added an attack vector by adding the key. And what most completely missed about my previous video is that I attacked the marketing, not the technical functioning or the security of the product. If you say it's passwordless and the reality doesn't agree, you should be called out for that. Because people should know what they're actually buying. If they would have said make your 2FA on websites that support it easier, then I wouldn't have called them out. If they would have said add 2FA to your Windows login, then at least that would be honest. But that's not what they said. They said passwordless. Well, you literally had to type in your password to go passwordless. I've spent some time with the key and watching and reading some tutorials, and I found out that you can actually set up Linux authentication to be completely passwordless with a YubiKey. So it is possible. So that's only Linux, not software, not websites, only Linux authentication. And the problem here again was documentation. Most tutorials assume that you want to set up 2FA for a computer. A proper tutorial, like the first one for example, that tells me that I should put in my YubiKey in my computer, could have told me that. That would have helped to avoid this misunderstanding. But the amount of effort and time that I had to spend to find this information is ridiculous. And effort equals friction. I had to manually change configuration files while there are 2 YubiKey applications right there. That's not frictionless. And for those who want to know, you need to edit at least 3 config files, one for the sudo command in etcpmd sudo, one for the terminal in etcpmd login, one for your GNOME login if you use GNOME, in etcpmd gmd password, one for KDE if you use KDE, so in etcpmd/sddm, and one for the GUI prompt in etcpmd pullkit1. And the order, by the way, in these config files matter, and yeah, I found out that the hard way. And I had to change the required parameter to sufficient. But again, how can you expect Tom, Dick and Harry to know or to figure this out? I thought it was rather funny how dysfunctional the product was, but clearly that didn't came across. We have to keep calling out big tech for their nonsense, otherwise the enshittification will never stop.